teaching on building effective sentences. Remember, we are looking at the structure of a sentence. We have seen how to make simple sentences and how to use two simple sentences or independent clauses to make a compound sentence. Here we are going to look at number C, the structure of a sentence, how to build a complex sentence. We have seen how to make simple sentence, and from simple sentence, how to build compound sentence. We are going to look at how to build a complex sentence. Remember, in this series, we are looking at building effective sentence, the structure of a sentence. The structure of a sentence. Now we look at how to build effective complex sentence. What is a complex sentence? A complex sentence is a sentence that has one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. One independent, that means you have one clause that is completely dependent on itself, and you have another clause that is depending on the first one. In other words, the first one cannot exist without the second one. The second one cannot exist without the first one. So, the second one, that is why it is dependent. So, the second clause is depending on the first clause. That means the second clause cannot come if not for the first clause. The first clause. So, although the second clause is depending on the first clause, the second clause is more important than the first clause. Let me say it again. A complex sentence is a sentence that has one independent clause and at least one dependent. Dependent, that means the first sentence that we make or the first clause we make is completely dependent on itself. It's self-existent. It doesn't depend on any. It is formed on its own. But the second clause is coming as a result of the first clause. It's the first clause that generated or generates the second clause. But the second clause is more important than the first clause, the independent clause. The dependent clause is more important than the independent clause. We're going to see that. It contains clauses which are not equal. Unlike the compound sentence. In compound sentence, the clauses are equal. They maintain balance. There is a parallelism. They are parallel. You see two clauses or two sentences that are equal, but they are joined together. But in this case, you have two clauses or two sentences, two symbols that are not equal. And tries to show what information depends on the other. And I told you the dependent one is more important than the independent one. Although the dependent one comes as a result of the independent one. The main clause and subordinate clause are connected to each other with a subordinating conjunction. Subordinating conjunction like although, after, since, and so on and so forth. So we're going to look at some examples. Number one, look at the first example. Although it was raining, Fatu decided to go for a walk. Let's do that. Although it was raining, Fatu decided to go for a walk. Fatu decided to go out for a walk. Although it was raining, Fatu decided to go out for a walk. Now you see, which one? This walk that Fatu decided to go was as a result of was as a result of this. So although it was raining, Fatu decided to go for a walk. So you see one independent clause, it was raining. Fatu decided to go for a walk. So you see one depending on the other. This one could not come except this one, but Fatu decided to go for a walk is more important than it was raining. Now let's take another one. Peter studied hard because he wanted to pass the exam. Let's take that. Peter studied hard. Peter studied hard. Why? Because he wanted to pass his exams. Peter studied hard because he wanted to pass the exam. He wanted to pass the exam. You see, why did he study hard? So Peter studied hard is completely independent clause. Now, he wanted to pass his exam. This is like depending on Peter studying what? Why Peter studied that? Because he wanted to pass his exam. So, he wanted to pass his exam, which is the independent clause, was dependent on that Peter studied hard. So, you see that. Now, let's take another one. After the movie ended, we went out for ice cream. After the movie ended, after the movie ended, we went out for ice cream. After the movie ended, we went out for ice cream. After the movie ended, we went out for ice cream. So, you see, after the movie ended, we went out for ice cream. So, that when going out for ice cream was dependent on the movie ending. So, going out for ice cream wouldn't have existed if not for the movie ending. So, that is that. Now, let's take another one. Since Jude arrived early, he had time to relax. Let's take another one. Since Jude arrived early. Since Jude arrived early, he had time. He had time to relax. Since Jude arrived early, he had time to relax. He had time to relax was dependent on Jude arrived early. Jude arrived early. Now let's take another one. Even though it was late, the students continued working on the project. Even though it was late. Even though it was late. Even though it was late. The children, the workers, continued to work on the project. The workers continued to work on the project. Even though it was late, the workers continued to work on the project. That's a complex sentence. Even though it was late, the workers continued to work on the project. Look at another one. If I look at another one, you see that you have quite a lot of sentences there. Even though it was late, the workers continued to work on the project. So you see complex sentences. One dependent clause and one independent clause. So you see one dependent clause. When you say one dependent, independent clause and one independent, that means you have the second sentence depending on the first sentence. You have the second sentence existing because of the first sentence. If the first sentence does not come, the second sentence will not be there. So the second sentence, that's why it is dependent. The second clause is dependent on the first clause. The second clause cannot come if not the first clause. That's why the first clause is dependent. So now it could be first sentence, it could be second sentence. So, but the case is that you have one independent clause and at least one dependent. But this dependent clause is more important than the independent clause. And there is no parallel. They are not equal. You see one clause depending on another. That this second clause is existing, or the first clause is existing as a result of the second clause, or the second clause is existing as a result of the first clause. That is what we call complex sentence. One independent clause and at least one dependent clause. But they are not equal. And it's showing which information is depending on the order. That is what we call a complex sentence. Now follow me as we go to a more practical session on these sentences. Simple sentence, complex sentence, and compound sentence. Share, subscribe, and give us a thumbs up.